Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. Imagine being a 12-year-old girl. You are going through the awkward adolescence of any of your peers, but there's a difference. You're 6 feet tall. You stand out, and although you are a person with many great qualities, it is only your height that people focus on. But soon you discover rowing. You love the sport. Better still, your height is an asset, a tool that assists you in excelling. This is the origin story of Olympic gold medalist Caryn Davies. Caryn would go on to study at Harvard and continue rowing there. She sat in the most important position on the boat, known as stroke, as she participated in 3 Olympic Games: Athens, Beijing, and London. She has won 2 gold medals and 1 silver. She also won the Thomas Keller Medal, which is the most prestigious award in rowing, and she's the only American to have ever won it. As if that weren't enough, she got her bachelor's degree at Harvard, an MBA at Oxford, and a law degree at Columbia. There are so many things I admire about Caryn. As you'll hear, she thinks deeply about sport, excellence, and being a well-rounded person outside of sports. You'll also hear I'm practically jumping out of my seat with excitement as Caryn tells her stories and shares her wisdom. So listen in as Caryn talks about winning in and out of the water. Caryn Davies, a hearty welcome to Super Psyched.
Thanks, Adam. Great to be here.
I have loved geeking out to your history. It reads almost like fiction, except for the fact it's entirely true. The idea that you get your bachelor's degree at Harvard, you go off and get your MBA at Oxford, you get your JD and become a licensed attorney going to Columbia School of Law. And you are the most medaled oarswoman in the history of the country, the most medaled Harvard graduate of all time. You've chaired the Olympic Committee. You've received the most coveted award in all of rowing, becoming the first American to do so. And simultaneously, you're a nice person with all of those things. I am so delighted to be learning from you today and to share your life with my listeners.
I'm really excited to share as well. When my dad retired, this was almost 10 years ago now, he was a professor at Cornell, and he had a retirement party, and people came from the 4 corners of the globe to attend his retirement party. These were his former students, mostly grad students. And one by one, people got up and told stories of how my dad had helped them, how he had changed their life. And I had just started out as a lawyer at the time. And I remember thinking, like, what am I doing with my life? This is what I want my retirement to look like, and how am I going to do that? And I think this is one of the ways that I can do that, is sharing my story.
Wonderful. We'll be getting into it, but the idea of winning the gold and the aftermath of this and the half-life of the good feelings, we're going to be getting into that to some extent. But before we do, you're 12 years old, you're 6 feet tall, you're in Ithaca, New York, probably near the Finger Lakes, I would imagine, probably Cayuga, and you start rowing.
Exactly.
It was Cayuga.
Yeah.
And you start rowing and you find this thing. I was just wondering if you could just talk about the origin story of you as a rower.
I was really awkward as a kid. Actually, most kids are. We just think that everyone else has it together and we're the only ones who have no idea who we are or what we're doing. But anyway, I was super awkward, and part of that had to do with how tall I was, because I was the tallest in my class. And I got recruited for rowing. The coach of the high school rowing team saw me in the supermarket and strode up to me purposefully. He was this big, gruff looking guy, and he said, "I want you for rowing." And I was terrified. I was like, who's this strange guy? I hid behind my father. But he explained that they had a team down on Lake Cayuga and asked if I wanted to give it a try. So I did. And I finally felt like I had found a place where I belong. It helps that most rowers are tall. So I found other tall, awkward kids. And I also was quite good at it, even from the start. So that made me feel like this is where I belong. This is my place. These are the people that value me. So I kept doing it.
And I'm just thinking about the onus of being tall and sticking out and the attention it draws, and it becomes the conversation piece. I have tall sons.
Oh, yeah.
All people say is, wow, you're so tall. And
Yeah.
there are a million other things besides tall.
Yeah.
And having a place, I'm thinking, especially as a female who is tall, having a place to really lean in to the strengths that were given to you through your height. It sounds like it was so empowering. And there are statistics that indicate that girls who play sports and really have a place to hang their hat and say, I'm good at this, are less likely to give in to sexual peer pressure and drug abuse. And I'm guessing having that place was maybe both a relief and kind of, wow, this is a superpower.
Yeah. Gave me a lot of confidence and helped me accept my body the way it's made.
So let's talk for a second about time management. I'm trying to imagine the singular focus of practicing rowing and the boredom, the hours of just sheer boredom to become good at a thing, and simultaneously rocking a Harvard bachelor's degree, which is very hard, and ballroom dancing on the side, which we'll get into. Can you describe how you manage your time?
It's funny. I had roommates in college who did not play sports and struggled with grades because it's almost like the more free time you have, the more you manage to fill it with video games or socializing. I think socializing is actually a very good thing. Even teammates who quit the team because they felt like they needed more time to study and then their grades dropped because they were not as efficient about their time. So also, one of the things I discovered very early on was we all know the rule that you get, 80% of your results from 20% of your effort. I didn't try to get A pluses. I tried to get good grades, but I knew that there's a point where you have diminishing returns. So you just really focus on the things that get you the most bang for your buck, shall we say. And actually that worked especially in law school. Undergrad was hard, but I don't think it was any harder than any other undergrad, for example. And law school was just so much harder, so much more reading, so much more pressure on the exams. But I figured out that my professor is grading my exam and everybody has a bit of an ego and they like to feel like someone is listening to them. So when it came to like, okay, I have all these textbooks, which ones do I prioritize? I always prioritize the one written by the professor. And I made sure that I quoted that very book in my essay on the exam. And that's how I got good grades.
It's incredible. It seems like you focused on what is going to be important as it relates to my use of time so that I can maximize the important and stay away. It's almost like you had a really good aim. I remember when I was doing my dissertation and one of the chairs of the department who I was asking who I should have help me get my dissertation chair, he described somebody and said, this person will help you write an excellent dissertation. And I said, I don't want to write an excellent dissertation. I want to write a done dissertation. I want to write a good one. And lo and behold, I got a really good chair. I think I actually overshot. I actually did fairly well on it, but I didn't want that person who was going to aim for some type of perfection.
Right.
I wanted to be done and do well and learn, of course. Let's talk about deliberate practice, because we know that 10,000 hours does not make an expert. You have to actually think about how you're using those hours
Yeah,
use those hours to deliberately to do better than the previous hour.
Right.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you upped your game through deliberate practice over the years of practicing rowing.
As with any endurance sport, there's kind of two pieces to it. There's fitness and there's skill. The fitness, I don't even know if that really requires deliberate practice. It just requires sitting your butt down and doing it, right? And actually, to me, that was almost the more interesting part, because it's really hard to motivate yourself to just do this thing over and over again when you're not in the moment seeing any improvements. Obviously, fitness, you see improvement over time, right? But from the beginning to a workout to the end of the workout, I don't get better at my fitness. I don't get faster necessarily. I mean, I can put in more effort and go faster. So for that, I played a lot of mind games with myself in terms of motivation. I would watch movies a lot of the time while I was on the rowing machine. I got really good at playing like number games in my head of, okay, I'm going to go for 2 minutes hard and then 1 minute easy and then 3 minutes hard and then 2 minutes. And you just kind of add it all up. Yeah, there's a certain amount of just doing the work. And then to your point of deliberate practice, I find the best way to do that is to put yourself in situations that challenge you. For me, I focused on, quite early on in my rowing career, I focused on rowing a single. A single is a very difficult boat to row. So this is a one-person boat as opposed to, say, an 8-person boat. A one-person boat is much more tippy. So you have to learn how to balance. Otherwise, you're going to fall in. And then once you get to the point where you don't feel like you're going to fall in, then there are various ways you can make it harder for yourself. Oh, I'm going to challenge myself to keep my oars off the water at all times, which is even harder to balance. Yeah, putting yourself in a situation where you almost have no choice but to get better.
I love that you differentiate between fitness and skill. I find myself thinking about Lord of the Rings, as I often do. The guy with the hammer, Gimli, with this blunt object versus Legolas with these arrows, precise for skill. And I remember also seeing Beyonce, young Beyonce, in a documentary, and she went running a lot. I remember being slightly befuddled. Why is she running so much? And of course, that was for her fitness. And then, of course, she was working on her skill with vocal coaches.
Yeah, because you have to be fit in order to have the lung capacity, don't you?
100%.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have to be fit in a boat in order to row it well, but you also have to be smart. And so the skill shows up. Don't just work harder, work smarter. Yeah. That's an aphorism we hear all the time. You actually applied it and saw the results.
Yeah.
So cool. Love that. All right, I'm just going to get into this one. What is the best piece of advice you've received and the worst piece of advice you've received as it relates to kicking ass?
Life. Okay, best piece of advice. Don't aim to have your best performance every day. Merely aim to beat your average and you will consistently improve.
That's amazing. Aim to beat your average and you will consistently improve.
I have a great story of the man who taught me this lesson. It was 2008. I was training for the Beijing Olympic Games. I'd already been to one Olympic Games in Athens. We won silver. Training for 2008, winning gold. But my performances were really inconsistent and it was really getting me down. I want to be the best this time and I'm going to do whatever it takes, obviously within the bounds of fair play. That was actually one thing he asked me. I started working with this sports psychologist and I was like, I will do whatever it takes to win gold. And he said, hold up. Let's talk about that. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not going to cheat, obviously, but whatever.
Machiavelli is not allowed in the boat.
Yeah, right? Man, doping, that's a whole nother thing that I would love to talk about. But so I was like, whatever workouts I got to do, whatever psychological, whatever training I have to do, I will do it. And he realized that I was just putting way too much pressure on myself. I have to be the best every day. And because of that, my performance was inconsistent. I would get tense. I would get nervous. And of course, every time I didn't have a good performance, it was this vicious cycle where then I would beat myself up. And then the next time I would get even more nervous and more tense because it's such a negative experience competing when you end up being so hard on yourself. Mm-hmm. So he said exactly that. Don't aim to have your best performance every day. Aim to beat your average because that way you will consistently improve. And that's The thing about people at the highest levels of sport, they weren't necessarily the most talented. They're just the people who figured out how to consistently get the most out of themselves. So fast forward, my teammates and I won a gold medal in the 8-person boat in Beijing. And I ran into this sports psychologist just before the closing ceremonies. And at that point, I hadn't worked with him for several months because I met him on a training camp. And he said, "Do you remember me?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Of course I remember you." And I have a picture of us with the gold medal. I said, "I wouldn't have won this without your advice."
It's amazing how just one pithy piece of wisdom can change everything. Mm-hmm. What's the worst you ever got? Maybe not the worst, but just something that you found to be counterproductive, but might be commonly thrown around.
This isn't a piece of advice. Before my first games, when I was my first couple of years training with the national team, I was so excited to be there. I loved running so much. I was having such a good time. I was just giddy. And we went on this training camp, and I asked one of the other women at the training center, "Why do you row? What do you love about it?" And she said, "I'm here because I want to prove to my mother that I'm worth something."
Wow.
And I was just so sad. I didn't know what to say. First of all, I didn't even know her that well. And the fact that she would open up to me like that, I feel like I have to hold this little nugget that you gave me very carefully, because very clearly she's a bit fragile. I was kind of like, oh, and I didn't say it, but I was thinking, I'm not sure how well that's going to work out for you. And sure enough, I discovered later that even after winning a gold medal, no amount of gold medals will make you enough. If you weren't enough before, you won't be enough after. And she actually didn't end up making the team. And I still think about her, and I really hope that she's found enough, that she feels like enough at this point.
It's such a tender story, and it really speaks to our innate desire to please our parents. We are wired to want our parents to approve of us. "Hey, Mom, watch as I dive off the high dive," or "Dad, I got the grade you wanted." Whatever it was. I remember in high school, it was with a friend of mine. I had already gotten accepted into college. I said, "Great, now you can slack off." And she said, "Why would I do that? I want to learn." I was so surprised. I thought the only reason we get good grades is for our parents. So later in life, of course, I developed more of an intrinsic mindset, but I get it. And I feel a lot of tenderness towards your former teammate who didn't make it. The why was clearly not strong enough. What was your why? What kept you in the boat going so hard?
I've asked myself that a lot over the years. I think in the beginning, it was partly a need for approval, not so much from my parents. I'm very lucky because they gave me unconditional love. In fact, I think sometimes they were a little bit like, maybe do you just want to go a little bit easy? It seems like you're really getting too hard on yourself with this. It doesn't really matter. But we were talking earlier about when I first got into rowing, what I got out of it. It was really a sense of belonging, a community, friends. And it's interesting. Why does that feel different than wanting approval from your parents? Something I'm not sure. But I think really the extension of that was just a really fun time. People say to me, "That must have been so hard. You must have worked so hard to win those medals." And I feel a little bit of an imposter when they say that, because subjectively it didn't feel hard. I was just hanging out with my friends, having a good time.
Did not expect that. You're really giving a massive shout out to the notion of joy and winning. And Steve Kerr talks about that. He's the winningest coach in the NBA, one of the winningest. I think he's got 10 rings combined as a player and as a coach. And I hear you say this, and it echoes exactly. He touted joy as being the driver. And I think about these lionized coaches who sometimes throw chairs and belittle their players. And sometimes they get lionized, but they don't win long term. You won long term. And it sounds like you were fueled by joy Am I correct the entire time?
Oh, 100%. Yes, yes. You can only get so far by just thrashing yourself, or if you're a coach, just thrashing your athletes. And you can get quite far. And that's the problem, is it people see results of just thrashing themselves. But then you will hit a wall, and your potential, it will be lower than your potential if you were to explore more of the joy and ease. I once said to a friend, I said, you know, those times when you have your PR, your personal best, and it just feels easy? And she looks at me and she was like, no. She said, I fought tooth and nail every stroke for every one of my personal records. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Because the times that I have performed my best are actually some of the easiest performances that I've had. And I don't think I would have rode for nearly as long as I did if I had to just fight, just slog through every performance. No, some of them are like that. We did these fitness tests, 30-minute long fitness tests. And I did one and it was easy and I went super fast. And I was like, that was so amazing. I can totally go faster next time. And a month later, we did another one. I went out harder and then I just hit a wall. With 16 minutes to go, I was basically in tears. But I salvaged it. I pushed through and I got the exact same score as I had the month before. And it felt completely different. And I was just always searching for that feeling of ease.
That is a powerful testimony to why we need to be fueled with this joy. It's so much more sustainable. If you think about the longevity of your career, it's astounding. I know you even went back beyond that time for the 2021 Olympics, and that's a story unto itself. But even just having the willingness to engage that hard, that long, it just makes so much sense to me that joy would be at the heart of your efforts. I want to give a shout out to a couple other things that you dropped, one of which is that if you weren't happy, so to speak, before you got the gold, you're not going to be happy after you get the gold. Adam Sandler did a really funny piece on SNL recently where he was an Italian tour guide, or a tour guide of Italy, I should say, an American guy. And he said, look, if you're not happy before you go to Italy, you're not going to be happy after you come back from Italy, or maybe while you're in Italy, I forget. And Conan O'Brien talks about this all the time. He expected his fame, or that next level of fame, to make him happier. And yet it was very, very anticlimactic. He's still the same person. And let's talk about the half-life of the gold. You get a gold medal. Holy smokes. You've been wanting this all your life. I believe you cited about 2 weeks after receiving the gold is when it begins to peter out. I was wondering if you could describe that phenomenon of perhaps the joy or the relief of winning the gold and what happens after.
Yeah, it's interesting. You brought up another thing, joy versus relief, but we can talk about that after. Probably the best moment is the next morning when you wake up, because you're like, where am I? And then you remember, oh yeah, I won an Olympic gold medal yesterday. And you look on your nightstand and there's that gold medal and you just want to hug yourself and say, I did it. That doesn't even last 2 weeks. You wake up and you're like, oh, Olympic gold medalist. And then 2 weeks later, you're done celebrating. Everybody goes home. You look around and you're kind of like, all right, well, now what? I had this goal that guided every decision for years. And you kind of just feel lost. Who am I now that I no longer have a goal? So that's when you start to realize, well, achieving this goal isn't going to bring me happiness. And a lot of people, they put salve on that wound by just finding the next goal. And that works for a few times until you realize just setting another goal isn't going to make me happy. I mean, actually setting the goal and working towards it might make you happy, but achieving that goal is not going to make you happy. And then you start to wonder, what's the point of even setting a goal? Maybe I ought to be looking for other ways to be happy or to feel like enough.
And it sounds like you have kept a really diversified portfolio so that you have other things to lean on in addition to rowing.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're a ballroom dancer, and I believe you've done other things, including your academic pursuits.
Mm-hmm.
How has that been helpful in terms of perhaps reducing the diminishing shine of the gold?
The letdown. I always intuitively knew that I had to have other things, and it was mostly not from achieving the goal and then feeling the untetheredness of no longer having it. I started out more that in the times when I failed to achieve a goal or just generally had a bad performance, I knew that I needed something else to ground my identity, because if your entire identity is wrapped up in this one thing and that one thing isn't always going well, then you lose your identity as soon as it's no longer working out the way you want it to. So whenever I would have a bad performance, I would look for other ways to feel like myself, other interests. Ballroom dancing was one of them. I competed. I was by no means any good, but I just love dancing, just the feeling, the joy. For me, just dancing, I just have this smile plastered on my face when I'm doing it. And I just didn't care that I wasn't very good at it. So yeah, I had other things in my life, and that really helped me deal with that feeling of achieving a goal and then experiencing, it's sort of like jumping off a cliff, right? You're climbing this hill, and then you just sort of jump into the void once you no longer have the goal. One of my teammates pulled me aside in 2004, which was my first games. She had been to an Olympic Games previously. She pulled me aside and she said, no matter what happens in Athens, whether we win or lose, there is no losing, but whether we win or not, you will be depressed. And you need to have a plan for what you will do afterwards. You need to have some structure to your life so that you don't feel lost. And that was really helpful advice. And thankfully, I had to put zero thought into that plan because I was actually midway through my undergraduate studies. So I already knew that I was going to go straight back to Harvard and continue with that. So that gave me structure and purpose. But I do know of many Olympians who they went to the games, and some of them won, some of them didn't, but everyone felt lost afterwards.
Everyone felt lost afterwards. It's almost like there should be a handbook for, now that you've completed this incredible thing, now what?
There is.
Oh, there is.
Yeah, the USOPC in the last 10 years or so recognized that this was a real problem, and they've developed programs to help athletes transition.
Incredible. You even talked about the fact that rates of suicide can be higher after the Olympics because of this profound loss of meaning.
Yeah. I even know a British athlete who won gold and then killed herself.
Oh my gosh.
And it reminds me of something someone once said to me. They said, if I were you, I would never have a bad day. I would just put on my medals and I would look in the mirror and I would say, you are amazing. It doesn't work that way. And
it doesn't.
I wish it did. It made me so sad when they said that because I was having a bad day. And I was like, wow, darn, I must be doing something wrong.
I'm going to say something that's going to be ridiculous, but I'm thinking about extreme experiences. For certain, being an Olympian is an extreme experience. It involves walking around the track with the flag and everybody getting excited and seeing people, gorgeous people from other countries who are really competitive. And it's like being at camp, except for the fact that it's really intense, but probably also fun, I've heard. And there's a sense of community and intensity. And it's the what after. Viktor Frankl speaks of this in Man's Search for Meaning when he was in a horrible, intense experience. He was in Auschwitz. And what helped him get through was his recognition that he had the ability of final freedom to choose what a thing meant. And he also thought about what was he going to do after, assuming he survived. And it's what are we going to do after an extreme experience, whether it's extremely positive or extremely negative? It seems like in both cases, we need to have a plan for what next.
Yeah.
What after? I'm also taken by the idea of belonging versus fitting in. Brene Brown talks about this, and she says that the opposite of belonging is fitting in. And you talked about belonging, like I found a place to belong rather than just having to fit in, which would be challenging as a 6'4" woman. You found your place. And I'm so touched by that. I was wondering if you could talk about the sustainability of the relationships, these really intense relationships, the bonds that were formed. I'm guessing that maybe some fell by the wayside and you were surprised and sad, and some you've maintained. I was wondering, with whom have you stayed in contact of your homies in the boat?
So everyone that I've competed with in the Olympic Games, I will always have a special relationship with those women. And some of them I talk to more than others. Some of them I would choose to hang out with more than others. But with everyone, there is a special bond. One of my teammates referred to us as the wolf pack. It was kind of like that. We scattered to the four corners of the globe, but there will always be the bond built out of that shared experience. And what you said, you were saying the difference between belonging and fitting in. I love that. The way I understand it, tell me if this is right, is that belonging is you are accepted for exactly who you are. Exactly. Fitting in is you change who you are to try to gain acceptance. Yeah.
That's right.
That's exactly what the difference that I felt between just at school. I felt like I was trying to fit in. My pants were too short. I didn't feel like I could show up as exactly who I was. And then when I started rowing, I found that suddenly the things that made me feel awkward in school were actually celebrated, like my height at the boathouse. And that completely changed who I was. One of my high school teachers, she said, "You're completely different than you were at the start of this year." I really came out of my shell. I was no longer trying to fit in. I had found a place I belong.
So moving to hear. And I'm so glad that you got that. Let's talk about that other thing of the joy versus the relief of the win.
Yeah. That's the main difference I felt between the first gold medal that we won in Beijing. That was joy because the U.S. women had not won a gold medal for more than 20 years. And we just felt like we were pioneering this new era, which we did actually. Between 2006 and 2016, we had an 11-year winning streak. But
Oh my God, no pressure. What are we talking about here?
Well, exactly. That's the thing is by 2012, like we'd been winning for years and everyone just expected us to win. Instead of, hey, let's do this cool new thing together, it became, let's just not screw this up. So crossing the line in 2012, my first emotion was relief. And it was mixed with joy, of course. It was just a lot of pressure. It felt very different.
One of the things we know through research in positive psychology is there's a difference between what we call an approach versus an avoid goal. An approach goal is, I want to win the gold. The avoid goal is, I don't want to lose this streak.
Yes.
The I don't want to lose the streak tends to portend poorly. You're less likely to hit the goal, and you're certainly going to have less joy and fun while you're pursuing it when you are in that avoid mindset. And I'm just thinking about you, and I've just got so much compassion and kind of sadness for you about here you are at the greatest moment of life, and you're just saying, I don't want to lose the streak, rather than this is amazing. That just seems like, so based on my knowledge of you, not who you are. You're a joyful person.
I saw it so I retired after 2012, but that change in attitude kept swinging, so that talking to the women who trained and raced in 2016, there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of pressure, and not a lot of joy. A lot of them did not enjoy that cycle, that 4-year Olympiad. And that made me really sad.
Wow. What would your advice be to people who are trying not to lose rather than trying to win?
Oh. this is going to sound really strange. Just lose. Yeah, because there's something freeing about realizing that it's not the end of the world.
Oh my God, it's so good.
And you don't want to lose on purpose. That almost,
Of course,
that defeats the purpose. It's not like you don't want to try. But I suppose go into it knowing that if you win, that's wonderful. But if you lose, honestly, that might even be better. So I came out of retirement in 2019, but to train for 2020, which became 2021 because the games were postponed. Well, I knew that making the team might be a long shot because I was a lot older and not as fast. And all the women I was competing against were even faster than when I was young.
And to be clear, you were 36 at the time, or 36 or 37, depending.
37. Yeah, I knew that I might not make the team. And I decided, before I quit my job, I decided that no matter what happens, whether I make it or not, I'm going to make this year worth it. This is not about winning. Obviously, I would love to win another medal. I'd love to make the team, but that's not what I'm doing this for. And I ended up not making the team, which is a old story in itself. But in a lot of ways, that was one of the best experiences of my athletic career. I learned so much about myself, about people, about how to handle situations. I'm glad that I failed.
What did you learn from failing?
Well, here's where I launch into the story because you got to hear the backstory.
So good. I've already heard it, but I love it so much.
I mentioned that I wanted it to be worth it, whether or not I made the team. And so I chose my goals very carefully. I had two goals. I said, I want to be the best teammate I can be. And part of that actually was I knew that that would help me make the team because my strength is making other people faster. And you always want someone like that on your team. But I wanted to be the best teammate I could be. I imagined myself kind of stepping into this role of mentor. And I wanted to learn something new because I figured, well, I'm not learning anything. Well, what's the point of doing it, right? I really need to just find all those little nuggets that I may have missed in the other years when I was young and naive. So I went back to the training center. And the thing was, I was scared. I showed up at the boathouse and there were these women who were so fast, setting world records on the rowing machine. Big women, like I'm the tallest, but I was definitely not the strongest or the biggest. And going back to belonging and fitting in, right? I need to fit in. And I was like, I need to prove myself, prove that I belong here. So I did what had worked for me in past, which is put my head down and just worked hard, which actually was very difficult because at 37, I couldn't work as hard as I used to. It didn't recover as fast. I was tired all the time. I wasn't performing well. I wasn't really making friends because I felt like I didn't deserve to be myself. It just wasn't going well. And then I kind of clawed my way up to where it looked like I might make the team, wasn't sure. And then COVID happened and everything shut down and the games were postponed. And I faced this decision of it. Am I going to do this for another year? And I didn't really want to. It was like a miserable experience up until that point. I was so lonely. And I remember speaking with my now husband and fiance on the phone, and I think I'm just going to quit. And he said, well, did you achieve your goals? Well, no, I haven't. I don't know what I've learned. And I can't even be a good teammate because I'm too afraid. So I thought, all right, well, this is actually a really good thing. I get a do-over. This postponement gives me a chance to start again, start fresh. So that summer, we were all self-isolating, training on our own. I set up a phone call with every one of my teammates. There were about 25 women who were part of that training group. And I asked each woman, what can I do to be a better teammate to you? this is exactly what I should have done at the start, right? Like I'm learning how to be a better teammate and then I can put that into practice. Exactly what I need. And that was the hardest thing I've ever done. Asking for feedback. Feedback is just so hard because the most useful feedback is telling you that you're failing at something. Here's what you need to do better. So I could only manage about 2 of those conversations a week because they were so emotionally draining. And some of them were not useful. I got a lot of feedback that was not useful. One woman said to me, well, I've known you for 16 years and I have nothing good to say about you.
Oh my God. Sorry, that goes in the shredder. That is absolutely useless.
And so one of the things I learned is that when someone gives you feedback, if it's useful, even if it's hard to hear, if it's useful, take it on board. If it is not useful, put it in the trash. Be done with it. Don't dwell on it. And that feedback was not useful. And I was literally like, okay, but what can I do better?
Could you please be a little more precise than globally hating me? Globally hating me is, not helpful. I mean, by the way, one of the trolls on my first TEDx said 15 minutes of nothing that went nowhere. So okay, that's useful. I know it's 15 minutes of something that went somewhere, but okay.
That's feedback that is not useful. Anyway, so I received other very difficult feedback that was very helpful. As an example, one woman said to me, everyone here thinks that you're entitled. And the reason we think that is because you just go about your business and you seem like it's easy for you. You think that you're going to make this team no matter what. And I realized that what internally for me was I am scared. Don't think I'm going to make the team. And therefore I'm going to be quiet and not talk to anyone. It came across as I'm so good. I don't need you to make the team. Right. So that was very useful feedback. And so after that, I started to come out of my shell and show people how much I was struggling and how hard this was for me, which then, interestingly, you think of a mentor as someone who's figured it out and knows, here's how to do it. But actually, I found that by saying, this is hard for me too. I don't know everything. Here's what I do know, but there's a lot I still don't know, was much more helpful to people. And finally, by being vulnerable, I became more of a leader and I started to develop those relationships where people would look to me and say, well, how did you handle this? What's your advice? So things started to really look up. I started to belong instead of trying to fit in.
Nice.
And things were going well. And then I got injured. I hurt my shoulder doing some stretching and it kept me out of the boat for 3 months. Oh, another one of the hardest things I've ever done. I was on the exercise bike trying to stay fit for hours a day as I watched all my teammates walk to the boathouse, pick the boat up, carry it out into the sunshine. And I just felt like as they walked away, I felt like I was also watching my Olympic dreams just recede into the sunshine. Again, I almost quit. And then I thought, well, you know what? I don't have to be in the boat. I don't have to be going fast to achieve my goal of being a good teammate, of learning something new. So I just kept showing up and just kept making it clear to everyone that I'm here to support you. I'm here for the team, not just for me. And then eventually I got back in the boat, but I had lost too much ground and I clearly wasn't going to make the team. So eventually the coach, and I've known this coach for 20 years, he coached me through all my Olympic games. He called me into his office one day and he said, I think you know what I'm going to say. I was like, yep, I do. I'm getting cut, aren't I? And he said, yeah, I'm not going to give you any more chances. This is it. And that was exactly what I expected. But then he said something that I didn't expect. He said, these women who are going to make the team, a lot of them don't yet know, and some may never know, what it means to be a true Olympian. But you've showed with your actions in these past months and your support of the team that you are a true Olympian. And I walked out of his office, trying not to cry. And I walked out of the boathouse, past the boat bay where basically the group that was going to make the team was stretching, getting ready for practice. And I couldn't even look at them because I knew if I did that I would burst into tears. And I just couldn't handle it. So I just walked right by, didn't look at anybody. And the same woman who told me why people think I'm entitled, she said to me later, when you walked by and you didn't even look at us, I thought, is this how Caryn Davies ends her Olympic career? She just walks away and she doesn't say goodbye. But that's not how my career ended. Over the next couple days and weeks, I got messages from most of the women on the team thanking me for supporting them, mentoring them, making them better athletes. One woman said, I couldn't have gotten through this year without you. And getting those messages, I realized that I had won something more important than another Olympic gold medal. And that was the trust and respect of my teammates.
It's almost like you had an experience of your father's retirement.
Yeah.
At that moment as well.
Yeah. That's when you know you belong somewhere.
And the idea of losing well, I remember a very seasoned psychologist said that if he could only teach his children one thing, it would be how to lose well. And I think that is an important part of the thing. And the idea that you said, of course, don't intentionally lose, but there is, if it's handled properly, if you did your best, there is an upside to losing. And I was wondering if you could expand on that idea of, at that moment, in your coach's eyes of 20 years, that you were a true Olympian.
Yeah.
What meaning do you glean from that statement? That is a really powerful and perhaps even Talmudic statement over which many people could argue of what does that mean? But I was wondering, what did that mean to you?
I go back to the Olympic Charter. The Olympic Charter is the document that created the modern Olympic Games. And there's a quote, Olympism seeks to create a way of life based on the joy found in effort and the educational value of a good example. So I think what I did so well, and we already talked about finding joy. That was something that came easy for me. I think that what I did well more recently was set a good example of supporting the team, being unselfish, understanding that it's not about me, because it never is about you in life. We all walk through life thinking that the way people react to us is about us. It's not. So the best thing you can do is just understand your place in relation to others and how you can be helpful. That was actually, so I read a book co-written by the Dalai Lama, and the one nugget I got out of it was the quickest way to attain grace in any situation is to ask, how can I be helpful?
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. There are so many things that you've said that have changed my neural pathways, quite frankly. And this idea of losing gracefully is such a big deal. How can I be helpful? And coming at the world from that perspective is so, so beautiful. Even in just the tiniest forms, my son, who greets me at the door and says, Daddy, can I help you carry this stuff in? Just tiny little things, whether it's on the boat or in the home or anywhere in the world. Our social brains were meant to cooperate. We've even seen in game theory that those who cooperate win. They just win over the long haul. And then in terms of losing, as just accepting loss, I find myself thinking about Bill Hader, who's one of my favorite people in SNL history. He's maybe on the short list of the funniest people of all time, but he suffers from extreme anxiety and panic. And he worried so much about getting his lines right live from New York. At that time, one of his strategies was, and he learned this from his therapist, to purposely botch his lines while keeping the spirit of the line intact. But saying it differently from how it was, just so that he could be exposed to it and realize through the exposure, I'll be okay.
So that reminds me of something I think about in rowing technique. Sometimes I marvel at, we talked about weather. I think it was before we even started rolling the camera, but we talked about weather. And there are a lot of people who really racing or even rowing in rough weather, get waves, and it just makes it harder, so right? Terrible. And then they feel, they're like, oh, they get tense and worry about messing up. I've always been good at rough weather for two reasons. One, I just think it's fun. One of my coaches, one of my great mentors, a coach I had in high school, we were rowing singles and there was some rough water and I was getting a little frustrated, and she turned to me and she said, people at Disney World pay for this.
That's awesome.
I was like, there's water splashing everywhere and the boat's rocking around. And it just completely changed how I thought about it. So it was fun. But then also botching things up, I realized that everyone's going to take bad strokes in rough weather. You're not going to have a perfect race. And the difference between the person who doesn't do well and the person who does do well, and also the difference between someone who's not experienced and someone who is experienced, is how you recover from it. Or might get knocked out of your hand, but sometimes I marvel, my oar gets knocked out of my hand and I don't even have to think about it. I just grab it and keep going because I have that experience of knowing what to do. And I look at my hand like, did I just do that? That was really cool. Yeah, whenever it's rough weather, I'm like, yes, this is going to be so great because all I have to do is make fewer mistakes than the next person. I don't have to be perfect.
That's so incredible. And I find myself thinking of Phil Stutz, who wrote The Tools, and he's on Netflix with Jonah Hill. Famously, he talks about the idea of bring it on.
Yeah.
And he said the difference between a good football player, for example, was the guy who knew there will be pain and just bring it on. So you, in this rocky boat, are like, bring it on. It's
exactly.
People pay for this at Disneyland, and all I need to do is make fewer mistakes than the other person, and I'll be fine. But the thing that gives me the most joy as I listen to it, the vitality that you bring to that encounter of, hey, this is going to be great. In fact, I love the rockiness of it. Is that what I'm getting?
Yeah. And that's how I approach competitions in general. Is so one of my coxswains in college, she was like, I used to really worry about you before a competition because you get really goofy. And then I realized that was just the way you get ready. Because what I would do is I'd put on my headphones and I would start dancing around and be like, yeah. And in my head, I was thinking, hey, everybody, watch this. This is going to be awesome. It's going to be so fun. Bring it on. It wasn't like, I'm going to crush the competition, which I find is not that helpful because then it just brings tension. But it was more of a like, check out what we can do. Yeah. Bring it on.
The listener, I wish you could see her physical movements, but they're so fun, joyful, and not hostile, I'll add. There's something so lovely about that. And I think that's a great ritual to have before something as intense as this. One of the other things that you said in another conversation, I would be remiss if I didn't cite it, was that you would look sometimes at the competition and either quietly or externally thank them for being there, because without them, there is no competition. And rather than looking at them as an enemy, you were welcoming them with gratitude, which I've never heard that before. And that's so good. There are a few other things. I just needed to say it again. My strength is making other people faster.
Yeah.
What are we even talking about here? That is such a great strength to have. Of all the strengths I can think of, and I'm going back to Aristotle and Plato and ancient Greece, I would think that that would be the most virtuous of the strengths to have in the boat, is to make other people faster. And I was just wondering if you could operationalize that before I get to my final question. How do you make other people faster?
Okay, there's a lot in there. Let me go back to what you said about gratitude for your competition. That came out of a pre-race speech that our coach would give us, and it was usually some form of the same thing, which was look left, Canada, nod, smile, how you doing? Look right, Romania, hey, how you doing? Great to be here. Look straight ahead, take a deep breath, and smile. And so I interpreted that as I'm thanking my competition, like, hey, good to see you. Thanks for being here. Because if you weren't here, then I wouldn't get to do what I'm about to do, which is to go really, really fast. I'm so excited about it because if you weren't here pushing me, I wouldn't go that fast. And more to the point, nobody would care how fast I went because no one would be watching.
That's right. I'd be alone in the Charles.
Right. Yeah. So this whole thing of the Olympic Games wouldn't exist if you weren't here to push me as hard as you can and try to beat me. So thanks for being here and trying to beat me. And then when you look at it that way, it's not so scary. It's no longer, oh, these people are trying to crush me. It's like, we're doing this together. And gratitude is incompatible with so many emotions, one of them being fear and nerves. And then the look straight ahead, take a deep breath and smile. That's like, okay, you've acknowledged your competition. Now focus on yourself. This is going to be fun. Be present in the moment, deep breath, smile. And that was very effective for me. Also, I'm a social person. I made friends, and I figured it's way better to make friends with your competition than to intimidate them, because if you are mean to them and you try to intimidate them, that just gives them a reason to beat you, and you should never give someone a reason to beat you.
So good. And how do you make others faster?
Oh, yeah. So this is something I figured out leading up to 2008. The coach put me in the stroke seat. The stroke seat is the pace setter of an 8-oared boat. It's actually at the back of the boat because, of course, you're facing backwards, but everyone is looking at you and trying to follow your rhythm. He put me there because I'm a very technically proficient athlete. Get my blade in the water and I do the things you're supposed to do. And so he wanted other people to follow me technically. But what I realized when I was up there is I could row a perfect stroke. But if other people aren't rowing the same stroke, then we're not going to go fast. It doesn't matter how good I am or good a rhythm I'm setting. So what I started to do is I could feel kind of what was going on behind me. And I also would watch the coxswain in front of me. I could see the reflection of the blades behind me in her sunglasses. So I would just stare at her sunglasses and try to figure out what was going on behind me. And if the boat wasn't in sync, or if I was doing something that other people couldn't follow, I would change what I was doing until the boat got in sync again. Then we would go faster. And I realized my job up here is not to be technically proficient or a great athlete myself. My job is to get the boat rowing together. And I'm going to do what I have to do to help other people to make their life easier, to make them more able to follow me. So the day I realized that was the day I went from being a good stroke to a great stroke. It was the day our boat went from being fast to gold medal winning fast.
Which meant you were in sync, I'm guessing, and that you had some form of almost drummer-like sensitivity. Rhythm section, maybe bass player and drummer, really, really tuning in to the tempo, the speed of your fellow mates. Because even if you were doing it perfectly and super fast, it didn't matter if they weren't in sync. And the whole idea of the African proverb that's thrown around a lot, and it's a great one, and we need to be reminded of it. But if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Go together. Yes.
And so you were really dialed into that idea in practice, and the results speak for themselves. Just unbelievable. I'm so happy that you exist and that you are able to share your experiences, and that you've diversified your account and you're doing all kinds of things that give you joy, I'm sure. You're a mom, you're a wife, you're a lawyer, you're a rower, you're an executive with the International Olympic Committee. That's incredible. Is that all correct?
All except for the last one. I'm the president of the Alumni Association, U.S. Olympians and Paralympians Association. That's the alumni group.
My apologies. Yeah, I misquoted it. But those are just the things I know about you. I'm sure there's even more layers to who you are. Okay, then my final question to you. It's a magical question I ask everyone. But if you had the power to confer upon all humanity one insight or skill that would dramatically improve the lives of the individual, but since we're all connected, it would probably impact others around that individual, what insight or skill would that be? And how do you imagine it would improve the lives of the individual as well as society at large?
Compassion. I've had a crash master course in compassion ever since having a baby. Because babies are not able to tell you what they need other than by crying. So you just have to be so tuned in. And there's nothing that is more raw and emotional than being a parent to a child that just needs you to survive. And one of the ways it's changed how I look at the world, I said earlier in our conversation, I said, it's never about you. That's one of the things that I've learned ever since having a baby is that life is tough and people are going through so much. And there's so many things that can upset you. And when my son's screaming in my face, I know it's not about me, right? He's hungry. He's tired. He needs his diaper changed, something, but it's not me. And that helps me understand that when people treat me in ways that I don't appreciate, it's not about me. They might be hungry. They might need to go to the bathroom. They might be tired. They might just be feeling vulnerable. And so having that compassion, or remember I said, fastest way to attain grace is to ask, how can I help? Which is that form of compassion. How can I help you? Figuring out, how can I ease your suffering? Because everyone suffers. And the best thing we can do is just try to make a little less suffering in the world.
Beautifully articulated is Michael Stipe from REM saying everybody hurts. And the idea of compassion is empathy plus the desire to help. And the how can I help piece, which is so beautifully articulated in New Amsterdam. I don't know if you've ever seen the show, but this chief medical officer, he's just constantly walking around asking, how can I help? And those are magical words. If you think about it, those are the magic words. How can I help? And compassion, my goodness, if I'd only known when I was a new father that it wasn't about me when my child was crying. I knew that intellectually, but I just had difficulty getting it into practice for a while. Yeah. And one of the things that we know is that all pain comes from the resistance of what is actually going on, resisting what's happening. And that self-compassion piece, or the compassion piece, allows us to accept what's happening. The other person might be hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, and might need to go to the bathroom really badly. I'm taking a walk with my buddy Scott, and some dude just barrels through the stop sign, not so far away. And my first thought was, oh, what an a-hole. And he just looked at me and said, wow, that guy must be in a rush. And Scott is one of the greatest practitioners of compassion and mindfulness. And he just let go of it immediately because he just decided the story was that guy was in a real rush versus mine, which was, wow, what a self-absorbed individual. What was he thinking? And so the stories that we carry around the baby crying are manifold. And the idea of you just saying, it's not about me. Oh, it's so good.
You also had a really interesting, I guess maybe we would call it a Freudian slip, where you said self-compassion. And I think that's the varsity version. Compassion, that's the entry level, right? And self-compassion is the varsity level, because we're always harder on ourselves than we are on anyone else. So self-compassion is even an extension of compassion, and equally as important. I don't want to say more important because it's not about you, but equally as important.
Yeah. And even the Navy SEALs have begun trainings with that, and they find that they get better results faster and better overall. So it's a really powerful thing.
Well, we can't accept failure until we've shown ourselves a little compassion.
So true. And we can't become who we're meant to be unless we can accept failure. And Caryn, I could talk to you for hours, and I already have my ideas of second interview with you, because there are just so many layers to talk about with you that you share on such a deep and accessible level. Before I go, is there a book in the works?
So many people have asked me that. Not yet.
Okay. Would be a good one.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk about how you might be able to make that happen without too much of a headache, we can talk. It's been a delight to learn with you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
Likewise. Thanks for your enthusiasm. I love it.
This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe